Happy Friday night. Time for another chat here on the Paranormal Network. I'm Jason Hewlett, Paranormal Network Manager, sometimes Paranormal Investigator, welcoming my friend Anna Maria Manalo to the show. Anna Maria, thank you for coming on.
Hello, Jason. How are you this evening?
I am great. I'm glad we finally get to meet because we've been chatting online for quite a while, and we both are paranormal investigators. You're a former MUFON investigator. And you've written a new book called Haunted Heirlooms, which is a great subject because Peter and I, with we want to believe, did a whole couple episodes on haunted objects. We have a whole show about haunted objects here on the Paranormal Network. So I really wanted to kind of talk to you about this subject, having written a book. And welcome, Dylan. Thank you for coming and joining us. Laura and Samuel. So what first off, what inspired you to write a book about these haunted heirlooms? Where did the idea come from?
Well, Jason, that's a great question because it's been cooking for a while in my head. And I know with nonfiction, you got to get 10 million permission forms going.
Yes.
And it actually started when I was still in college, when I was just a wee child of 19, 18 years old. And I used to go to a lot of flea markets. And being I was only 30 minutes away, I'm originally from Connecticut. All we had to do was take the train and you were in New York. And certain areas of New York is a haven for antiques and a haven for flea markets. Not to mention Connecticut and all the other places around like Massachusetts, Rhode Island, etc. So I started just by basically looking at objects that I liked. I homed in on porcelain, tea services, silverware, things of that nature that, commonly people my age at the time wasn't really that fascinating to them, but I thought it was fascinating. And then I ventured into trying to acquire some pieces of furniture. So I actually start the book with my own experience with a haunted wing chair.
Oh my.
Was a yeah. And on Facebook, I found one. It was so funny because the day of the release of the book, there was this wing chair. It said, "Haunted, we hope."
I saw that, right? That's awesome.
You know what, though? I would not wish that on anybody because, frankly, this was happening in the early 80s. And at the time, because we were all students, it was a whole group of us that would go ahead and traipse into what they call a swap meet in California. It's a flea market in the East Coast. I don't know what they call it up there in Canada, but pretty much, all the stuff that people either discard or think are of no value. So I stepped into this particular wing chair. And because I'd been looking at antiques for a while, I kind of spotted that it had some value and it was in perfect condition. But to make a long story short, oh my goodness, what happened to me as I brought it back to the dorm?
Oh my, in a dorm, no less, even better.
Yes, a dorm, no less. So, I began the story with that and then proceeded with 4 antique dealers that I had dealt with since the 80s. Obviously, some of them are retired now. A couple of them are still in business. But because they acquire so much, sell so much, bid and auction different things. And they also get consignments from other antique dealers. They come upon some things that, and Jason, I don't know about you. Some people will touch an object and they sense something, a heaviness, a different feeling about the object.
Yeah, I've had more with places. Had that than objects. Do you know what I mean? But
yeah,
I know what you're talking about exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there are places that are like that. But there are certain antique shops out there. When you walk in, you get a vibe from certain rooms. And it's not so much the room, it's what's contained in it. And I want to make people aware, that these events are rare, I would say, on average. You walk up, it's not going to walk away from you or suddenly, break or fall into pieces or whatever. But sometimes you will encounter something that for some reason, whoever owned it before loved it so much they can't let go.
And do you think, and this is kind of, we wanted to touch on this anyways, we talked pre-show,
Mhm.
there's kind of a difference between like a haunted object and a cursed object, right? What do you think the majority of what you've experienced, is it haunted, like some presence attached to it, or is it something that's been cursed by somebody?
Okay, and this is not by any means any kind of professional opinion, but through the years, as I've seen different art pieces, different antiques, could be a statue, could be a lamp, could be something as small, as a figurine or something. Something that is haunted usually has some kind of spirit that still, I'll give you a case in point. One of the cases in the book concerns an urn.
Okay.
The urn is about 3 feet high, and the urn was purchased overseas in Europe and was sent over, all wrapped up, beautifully packaged to make sure that nothing happened to it. It came with what I would call a guardian. And what I mean by that is it's actually a spirit that when it arrives in a house, it hovers over it.
So it kind
So
of, does it
you get
leave
a
the object?
sense.
Sorry,
What's that?
does it leave the object then and then attach itself to the house itself, or does it stay contained within that object? Like, how does
In
that
this
work?
case, it starts haunting the house
Okay.
because whoever wants to possess the object or does something to the object, it attempts to protect it. Something happens to the person. A cursed object, on the other hand, the spirit or whatever it is that's no longer alive is not technically attached, is not anywhere near it. There's no guardian, but it's the energy that person in life had put on the object. So in other words, let's say you really love your cell phone, okay? And I mean, just as an example, not that
Oh,
it'll
that's
be an
fair enough.
antique. Yeah. But for example, something happens to you and you really love your cell phone. You say, I don't want anybody buying my cell phone, or it's exclusively mine. Whoever touches it, it's like the diamond in your Paranormal Network episode.
Mhm.
Okay. Whoever owns this diamond, whoever owns this cell phone is going to come into misfortune.
Okay.
So by intending it, which is another topic for another show about thought forms, but when you think about something intently and it's imbued with your emotional energy, it then becomes imprinted on the object of desire.
Okay.
Okay. In this case, the diamond. So you were talking about I think it was a blue diamond or the Orlov
The Black
diamond.
Orlov, yeah, which is in the
Yeah.
royal family. Yeah.
Yeah. So now what's happening is it has the energy of the person that cursed it. The soul isn't there, but the energy is imprinted so that whatever is happening around it, it reacts to it in a malevolent way. In this case, I think a man can't own it, right? It's only a woman that can wear the crown. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because any male who would try to wear the crown would either fall ill or have an accident or die before they got to it, etc.
And that was the nature of the intention.
Yeah.
So see, thoughts are energy, and when you think about someone who is emotionally connected to the object, the energy of the thought, the energy of the emotion attaches itself. So to me, that's the difference.
That's interesting. And so obviously with a curse, there is more of a malicious side to it. With a haunted object or a haunted heirloom, I guess it would depend on the nature of the spirit then that was there, right?
Yes. In one of the stories, which involves a barrister's bookcase, and for any of the audience who's not familiar, it's a bookcase that has glass coverings on every shelving, because way back when they were built, whatever brand they are, books were valued and you want to protect them. So the barrister's bookcase in this case ended up as being one of 4 in an antique shop. The person who formerly owned it had an illness, a chronic illness, and whoever tried to possess it ended up getting the illness.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So this one I thought was a little unusual in the sense that it seemed like it also carried a curse on top of the fact that the person who owned it was also hovering around the piece of furniture. So it's dual. It's pretty bad. So I made it last.
Yeah.
You go from, you know,
Fair enough, right?
yeah.
Just, just want to thank Nikki and Donald and Clancy and Cheryl and Jessica and Julie for joining us here. We are talking haunted heirlooms with Anna Maria Manalo. With your wingback chair. So what happened with the wingback chair that you
So
had?
the wingback chair was something that was basically an ornament placed by the window, in the sole window in my dorm room. And this was a girls' dorm, basically. And on the other wing were sequestered nuns.
Okay.
So it was kind of like an awkward situation where you had one wing that was all girls, and then one wing had nuns. The nuns were very progressive. They jogged, they ran, they did all kinds of sports. And one evening, after a few people had sighted a woman who looked like she was wearing flappers from the 1920s, coming out of my room while I was in the library and going back in, they started questioning, do you have a guest? So a lot of people started to feel apprehensive. There was something different about the hallway coming down to my room. People would visit my room and want to leave. Finally, there's the nun jogging, and then she gets hit on the leg with a woman who was wearing a dress, a long flapper dress. And she described it. It felt like a woman who was translucent, according to her. We got the ministry involved. They blessed the chair. Nothing happened. It got worse, if anything. So finally, a friend of mine who had originally taken it up to the dorm took it out. And it ended up at a shore house because the art and music majors, as well as the English majors, always got first dibs on the shore house. So imagine a shore house beach. We ended up having a seance trying to draw out whatever. Wrong. Not a good move.
Made it worse?
It made it worse. I won't give you the spoiler, but the long story short here, it ended up at the edge of the water because we tried to throw it out. And the tide won't even take it.
Interesting. Interesting.
Finally, he ended up in the trash.
And did it? I'm going to read the book. Never mind. I want people to read it too. But I'm fascinated by it because it almost sounds. It's like in the whole Annabelle story with the doll. Like if you believe the movie
in the Monroe, Connecticut. Yeah.
It's kind of almost got that vibe to it, right? Like it just won't go away no matter what you do. Is that like you say that this is rare? So is that kind of outcome very rare as well for things just to get that intense with these objects?
I don't know that the outcome for something that intense would be rare. Most haunted homes that I have seen in my lifetime, things get to the point where people either lose their jobs, the marriage breaks up, a lot of negative illness, catastrophic illnesses happen. I was born and raised in a house that was intensely haunted. Mm-hmm. And I kid you not about all the different things that happened while I was living there. So I would have to say a lot of times it does get worse before someone actually intervenes to make it better. Now, in some cases in the book, things got better as soon as they found the right person to address it.
Who could be like you, I guess, and that is a whole other topic of depending on sort of maybe where your faith lies or your spiritual belief lies, or who would be the right person to kind of deal with that matter. And I guess it would apply with a haunted object as well, right? How you want to deal with it.
Yeah. And I think it is driven by belief. I think so.
For sure. I mean, and I think a lot of the paranormal in general is driven. Your beliefs will drive almost your experience, right? And how you relate to the experiences will impact how those experiences can play out.
Right.
At least from my experience as an investigator of some 18 years now, right? And
well,
and it's all subjective too. Yeah. It's all subjective too, which I mean is a whole other side of it. One thing I wanted to ask you about on topic, like right now, there is this huge market on eBay for buying and selling haunted objects. And I guess with people almost intentionally doing this. Do you think that's a legitimate thing, or are people just profiting off of this craze, which it seems to become very, the whole paranormal in general is very popular right now. Haunted objects seem to be all the rage along with it. Like, what do you think's going on there with that?
I think personally it's very unhealthy to try and seek out something that could cause havoc in your environment. And it could be as bad as you becoming ill. And as I've mentioned before, sometimes people end up, it breaks up marriages. I mean, if it's got a demonic nature to it, and I do believe in demonic forces, it could follow the person for life. It could even attach itself to the person. And it does bring to mind things like Annabelle. These kinds of things where you're selling stuff on eBay, these haunted dolls. I think some of it, I'm sure if it looks malevolent, people think instantly, oh, it's haunted.
Of
Well,
course, right?
their own personal intention and their own interest brings in negativity. And sometimes that in itself can cause something which used to be benign to actually be inhabited just because you're inviting it in. So to me, it's very unhealthy that you would actually seek out something haunted, not realizing it's kind of like playing with an Ouija board.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's almost the same thing. You're intending and intentionally inviting something in that is not necessarily something sacred.
And I think people, because this is very popular right now, like it's a fad, that people aren't taking it as seriously. And you're suggesting that when people do that, they're setting themselves up for a real problem.
Yeah, I mean, unless you're really just playing and you really don't mean anything and you just want to say, oh, here's just a conversation piece.
Mm-hmm.
When I have dinner guests over, I'll just tell them, I got this from eBay and they claim it's haunted. But here's the thing, though. What if the person who's selling it, Jason, really has an infestation and it's coming from whatever that is? So
Exactly.
now they just brought in something that is going to take, to me, from based on what I've seen, monumental time and energy to just try and remove whatever is in there. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think that's something that, I mean, can be taken lightly, or?
I'm of the mind, like, I don't, like I've been, like I said, I've been investigating a long time. My colleague Peter has as well. And then we look at our shows that we do, we put a bit of a sense of humor in it because I think you kind of have to. But I think this is something you do not take lightly. As a general topic, you shouldn't, because I mean, I think the majority of it is benign. I think that the actual negative aspects are few and far between. But when there's something, part of the fear is just driven out of a lack of understanding. But when you do encounter something negative, it's negative.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's not something to that's not something to mess with.
Yeah.
In my mind, I've
Yeah.
encountered one thing that's terrified me, like, absolutely terrified me. And it turned me off investigating for a while, but it was enough. That's one thing was enough. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I'm going to tell you something. So in the Philippines, there's a house that was built in 1856. Okay.
Okay.
And you have to sit down for this.
I am. So we're
you
ready to go.
So in one of the rooms, and I own the home. That's how I know. So I can actually reveal anything I want about it.
No release forms needed for this one.
Yeah. So it has 4 bedrooms. It has a multitude of what they call santos, saints. They're tall figurines, statues. They're usually made of wood. They sit in the living room area. So my aunt currently lives there. And when I last visited her in the early 2000s, and then I think I was there 2013 or 14, I said, how come you have so many saints? And her response to me was, because there are some things in the other rooms that require me to keep this room at least a sacred space. Now, we've talked sacred spaces. People mentioned that they drop that, right? When you're
Yep.
doing meditation center. She was actually talking about a spot where none of the influences of the other rooms can actually enter.
Interesting.
So yeah, so that piqued me, Jason. That really, my hair was standing. When my hair doesn't usually stand, but it's wavy. But anyway, so she said to me, if you go to the one room in there, you tell me how you feel. So I did. I did.
Okay.
I opened the room and there was an armoire. Later on, I'll send it to you on Messenger, and you tell me if you see anything, because a
Okay.
number of people have. It is in my first book portal. It's a picture of an armoire. You go into the room and the armoire dominates the room, and it has a mirror. And when you look in the mirror, something looks back at you.
Oh, that just gave me chills. That just
The
gave me
room
chills.
is always dark, even in the middle of the day.
Ugh.
And what is jarring about this is that as you walk through the threshold, the temperature drops, and we're talking a tropical country now. It drops about 35 degrees. I kid you not, you could see your breath.
Wow.
There's a window behind the armoire that's always shut. There's a window on the side of the armoire, and you could even see the sun trying to steal in and attempt to, I guess, dispel the gloom in the room. And then I didn't see this until my cousin photographed it later on for me. After I left that country a month later, okay, and I didn't sleep in that house.
I
didn't
wouldn't
get
either. I'm usually pretty fearless, but that,
My cousin sent me a photograph, and he said, for posterity, keep this. I looked at it and I thought, what is that doing in there? You look at the window, and I said, is there a ledge outside the window? You know, like a casement window has it inside. Sometimes there's a ledge outside, and you could put potted plants, whatever you want. He said, no. I said, did you look at this picture that you sent me? He said, yes. What do you see in it? He said, I see something in the mirror. So I'm expanding. I don't see anything in the mirror personally. That's me.
mm-hmm.
What I did see was something right outside the window. It looked like it was sitting on a ledge.
Even though it's way up in the air and there's no way anybody could be up there.
And there is no ledge. This is the second floor. Okay. And I will tell you something about the history of the area. It was the site of a massacre. When the Japanese forces came in, World War II, that entire town had people who were massacred. It was a scene of all kinds of battles. A lot of people died.
That's crazy. I mean, and I believe every word of it.
You want me to tell you what was outside the window?
Okay. I need to know. I need to know.
So I'm thinking this is just me. Because when you're an investigator, you want to see something, right?
Yeah, right.
You,
It drives.
you kind of are, what is it called? There's a term for it. You want to see something when there's nothing.
Yeah.
So then I said, okay, I went ahead and published it. And I said, here's a room in a very old home. Anybody see anything? It was a ghost form. So people started circling, with like one of those highlight things that you can do on the computer. And they enhanced it. And then they took a copy of a Japanese helmet and sat it right next to it. And guess what?
It looked just like that.
It looked just like that. Sitting right there outside the window, and there was no ledge.
Yeah, I believe that. That's, that's and given the nature of what happened in that area, you would get negative energy attached to that space, right? No wonder you'd have that happening.
Mm-hmm.
And your story's touching a nerve with everybody. That's cool. Whoa. Yikes! I have chills.
And then the
um,
mirror itself, that's something else.
yeah. Oh, and
Yeah.
that mirrors are like have been known to be used as portals, right? There's a whole attached. There's a whole history around mirrors themselves as being portals from one side to the other, and
Yeah.
many stories related to that. I had Matt V wanted me to elaborate on my one thing. Um, I'll do it really quickly, just because Anna Maria is here, and I've got one more question for her before we wrapped up. But there's a local uh, former mental institution in the town where I live, and that's sort of where I first started doing my investigating. It's been abandoned for like 30 years. There's a tunnel system underneath, because where I am, it's Canada, it snows. So to move patients and supplies from one building to the next, they do it through tunnels. And I was out there with a friend of mine investigating, named Donna, and we'd investigated on the grounds and had a number of stuff happen that day. We were doing the tunnels and going through the tunnels, and we had kind of finished a run, left into the basement of one of the buildings, and decided to go back through the tunnels to where we parked and leave. Now, there's no airflow in these tunnels. There's nothing. The doors open and close like with ease. Turned around, opened the door, got it about halfway open, and something on the other side of that door pulled back with enough force that it slammed shut. I'm 6'1" in my 190s, and I had enough force. I was pulled off my feet and I hit the door. And Donna ran, like she left, which I don't blame her because I wasn't that far behind her. But that scared the crap out of me, that something unseen could have that amount of power, for lack of a better word, to do that. And that's the most terrifying thing I've experienced in almost 20 years of being a paranormal investigator. I guess sort of one last question here, other than where people can find your book, Haunted Heirlooms, which just came out this week, actually, where is what do you think is the most haunted thing you've experienced, other than obviously that mirror in the chair? What's the most haunted object you've come across?
The one that I think is most malignant, I actually saw it for myself, was a chest. The chest held some vintage wine, which is described in the last, I think it's the second to last story.
Mm-hmm.
And what scared me about it is how a being who is already passed, who died tragically in a fire, still has the desire to own something that exists in 3 dimensions.
Yeah.
It's almost like a person who is craving something after death to become alive again. And I smelled the sulfur issuing from the window where this thing was manifesting itself, and it really creeped me out. I decided I was not going to go back to that store ever again after that.
Yeah. That's like Kirby saying here, there's quite an emotional connection to something like that would cause it, I guess. It would cause that kind of, yeah, it's kind of what we've talked about over this last half hour, is there's some sort of emotional connection between whoever owned the object or what's haunting it to these objects, right? This isn't just something random that something's going to attach itself for no reason. There's usually a very big connection either in life or even, as you say, there in death.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, Jason, one of the things that, people need to remember is that if you come upon an object where you're sensing something in your gut, that there's something off about it, do walk away.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's rare, I know it's valuable, but if you're a real antique person, sometimes you just need to look maybe at a different type of, a different urn, a different vase, whatever it is that you're looking for, because it's not worth it. Once it comes into your home, it's very hard to get rid of it.
And I think that's something that we should leave people with. I think that's a great point to stop on, right? Like, just don't buy it on eBay because someone says it's haunted,
Yeah.
And don't be a jerk and sell it.
And chances are it's not. It really is just,
Yeah.
So you have an item in there. But if it is, then I don't know. I don't know what to tell them.
I wouldn't want to take that chance personally. Just from what you've said and our experiences just investigating this stuff, it's not something to take lightly. Anna Maria, where can people find your book?
Amazon. It's on Kindle and paperback. It's doing pretty well right now. I was pleasantly surprised to see that there were reviews there that were pretty strong.
There were.
And I think in the next couple of months I'll be releasing another one, not a couple of months, but probably in October, about a haunted hotel this time.
Nice. I think that's fantastic. I really liked having you on. I'm glad we could finally get the chance to have a conversation here. And please come back and join me in the next few months.
Well, thank you so much. I enjoyed it.
I very much appreciate it. Everyone, this is the last Friday Live chat until July 1st. I'm going on holidays here starting next week. Don't worry, the Paranormal Network will still have great content coming out 5 days a week in my absence, and I'll be back July 1st with a new Friday Live chat. Anna Maria, thank you again for joining me this evening. Thank you to everyone who joined and commented, and I will talk to you again soon. Until then,